Hi guys, this is my video on one of the newly released cards, or teased cards, for the One Night in Karazhan adventure, Malchezaar's Imp, which has the text, whenever you discard a card, draw a card, and it's a 1 mana 1/3. So this is just going to be a perfect excuse and time to talk about the discard mechanic, and what kind of a deck a discard Warlock deck would be. So first off, the discard mechanic itself, it's quite simple. You pay an immediate card-based cost in return for gaining something useful and powerful down the line, or even immediately. So we can see this goes in many different directions. So some cards are very simple, they have just abnormally large stats for their mana cost in exchange for discarding a card, as is the case with Succubus. There's also the effect of gaining stats over time, as is the case with Tiny Knight of Evil, as well as beneficial effects, such as Fist of Jaraxxus. And some cards combine these different effects. So Doomguard, which is easily one of the most powerful discard cards out there at the moment, is just a huge body for its mana cost. A 5/7 is much better than the traditional 5/5 or 5/6 5 mana body. And on top of this, it has Charge, which is usually a highly costed effect on a card, and the Demon Tag just for 5 mana, which is really powerful, and is the reason why Doomguard has for so long been just absolutely core in zoo builds, as it is just that powerful of a card by itself. So with this in mind, discard cards can be seen as tempo gain cards. They encourage you to have a stronger immediate board presence in exchange for having a smaller hand, and so this kind of encourages an aggressive tempo-y style of deck. So circling back onto Malchezaar's Imp, clearly if you're a tempo deck, hero powering for card draw is bad, as using your hero power is just a complete tempo killer. The effect of drawing a card is roughly 1 mana worth, and using 2 mana to draw 1 card and not impact the board at all is just destructive to your tempo game plan. So Imp can be seen as a method of drawing cards in a discard tempo deck. You would expect a perfect curve to go Imp into Succubus or Darkshire Librarian. However, is card draw as a discard balancing effect better than traditional stat boosts or beneficial effects? As the exchange of discarding 1 card for drawing 1 card is rather odd when you think about it. You're essentially just trading 1 random card for another random card, and that's only an easy decision to make when your hand is bad. I mean, you could argue that it's a really easy decision simply because you're just going from 1 random thing to another, and so there's no real thought involved. It's just, hey, I'm going to lose a card but gain a card. That's fine. So why would you do this if the effect isn't that good? Well, the argument can be made that if it's early on in the game, and you've gotten some early cards from your mulligan, you can use a discard effect followed by a draw effect from the Imp to essentially swap your cheap cards for your mid-range cards, and so draw into more useful cards in the next few turns. And Imp as well also enables overall card gain with Darkshire Librarian, which is really important, as otherwise Darkshire Librarian is quite a bad card, as it literally just does nothing. It's a 3/2 that discards 1, draws 1, completely random. As well as Imp enabling Succubus and other discard 1 cards to kind of balance out that discard effect and neutralize it. So what this means is that a discard tempo deck is hugely synergy dependent, and this could mean that a bad draw could instantly lose you the game, as if you don't get Imp into Succubus, you're just playing Succubus turn 2, losing a card, losing complete card advantage, and yeah, that's not so great for your overall game plan of trying to win. So a discard deck would probably fill out its curve with just strong vanilla minions in order to improve its consistency, as this kind of deck really would want to be playing a strong minion almost every turn. Minions such as Flame Imp, Voidwalker and Imp Gang Boss, essentially borrowing from its zoo archetype to just fill out the curve, as let's be honest, there aren't actually that many discard cards for Warlock to play with, despite this new card being released. Therefore, if you're running Flame Imp, Voidwalker, Imp Gang Boss, and possibly even Wrathguard. You could also run demon buffs alongside these demon cards, as so many of your cards at that point have the demon tag, such as Flame Imp, Succubus, Tiny Knight of Evil, Wrathguard. And so, with this in mind, the deck really does start to make itself. And this was probably Blizzard's idea all along. It's a combination of the demon synergy with discard mechanic, just fueling this aggressive game plan of controlling the board with big minions, and then trying to go face when you have the opportunity. So with this we can see Blizzard's general class direction, not just with Warlock, but across Hearthstone. They're trying to push individual class themes and tribes and synergies in order to individualize their identity, as it's taken them a good while to kind of make this discard mechanic actually viable. And I believe that this discard Warlock deck might be experimented with on ladder, as it's interesting. The issue is that it has to compete with Zoo, as both this and Zoo are aggressive decks, and Zoo sets a very high bar in terms of just it being a tier 1 deck, and so this deck would have to beat that, or at least equalize with it, or have some far different matchups, which seems unlikely given that, like Zoo, this discard tempo Warlock deck would be highly bound to the board, and so would be weak and strong to the same things. So those are my opinions on Malchezaar's Imp and the discard mechanic, as well as a possible discard tempo deck in general. I believe that some experimentation with this kind of deck once Karazhan releases might end up with some cool results, but honestly it's going to be a tough road for this discard tempo deck that Blizzard is trying to push with Warlock, as it's competing with Zoo, and as mentioned, that's really hard to do. There is a very good reason why Zoo still exists today, and has been around for pretty much ever. So there we go, still excited for Karazhan, can't wait for cards like this to release so we can start experimenting and theory crafting can stop, and actual deck crafting can begin.